Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Robert McCaw. I am CARE's National Government Affairs Director. I am really pleased today to announce CARE's congressional legislative priorities for the 118th Congress. A new Congress has just started. I think, as many Americans are aware, they just selected their speaker. And from there on, in the next 2 years, Congress is going to be debating a number of bills, resolutions, and holding hearings that really impact the lives of all Americans. So this is a special announcement where we are now going to release CARE's legislative priorities. We have identified 25 bills or resolutions that CARE supports or opposes, and we've also identified 5 hearing topics for various congressional committees that we hope that they're going to adopt. So, to provide some information and background, America was built on a set of principles and laws intended to protect the rights and well-beings of all those who reside in our country. And despite some attempts in the past several years to limit the rights of religious minority communities in the U.S., these principles upon which our nation was founded continue to serve as a vision for a more equal and just society. So CARE, the Council on American and Islamic Relations, the nation's largest Muslim civil rights and advocacy organization, our organization, we encourage civic engagement between all communities and their elected officials with the goal of defending these principles and rights to ensure that our nation continues to realize its greatest potential. So the 118th Congress is started on January 3rd, and these legislative and advocacy priorities for the next 2 years that CARE will be promoting with American Muslims as the constituents of elected Muslims in Congress include not only defending American Muslim civil rights, but protecting the rights of all persons residing in the U.S. and the rights of all those seeking to travel to our shores. And we hope to uplift those lives that are impacted overseas by U.S. policy. And truly, in working to uphold the U.S. Constitution and American values, CARE's congressional and legislative advocacy agenda includes supporting certain resolutions or acts that have been highlighted in this report. And, I'm going to be going over a few of those. That includes promoting comprehensive reform to our nation's voting rights protections, immigration laws, law enforcement agencies, national security policies, foreign affairs, military aid, combating both domestic and international hate, upholding free speech, and recognizing the accomplishments and contributions of minority communities, including the American Muslim communities. Now, out of these 25 bills and resolutions that we've identified that CARE supports or opposes, our top 4 include the Combating International Islamophobia Act, which would create a special envoy at the U.S. State Department to monitor and report on Islamophobia taking place overseas. We also are which, by the way, passed last year in the House. It will be reintroduced, inshallah, this year in the House and Senate. So we hope to see action on this. Although the Biden administration, honestly, they could just create this position, especially since the House passed the bill last Congress. There's definitely a sign of intent that there's a congressional will for this. We're also supporting the National Origin-Based Anti-Discrimination for Non-Immigrants Act, also known as the No Ban Act. This was the congressional response to the Trump administration's Muslim and African countries ban, and it would place presidential authority under certain limits where there would have to be congressional and agency review before any future ban like that could ever be put in place. Hopefully, inshallah, that will never happen again. We are supporting the Access to Counsel Act, which guarantees the rights of American citizens when they are traveling into the United States, if they are stopped at CBP border stops, that they have the right to an attorney to be present for them. And finally, there are a number of resolutions that have been introduced in Congress that celebrate the history and the lives of Muslims in this country. So again, we would be supporting the Muslim Heritage Month resolution and resolutions marking Ramadan and Eid, both Eids. So Finally, not just with legislation and resolutions, but CARE supports greater congressional oversight, and committee hearings focus on the unconstitutional terrorism watch list, countering violent extremism legacy programs, and we're also looking to expose the connections between charitable and foundation donations to anti-Muslim hate groups, and how that connects to anti-Muslim hate crimes and bias incidents. We would also be promoting hearings that would designate India as a country of particular concern. And we would also like greater oversight in how the military is purchasing data from apps like Muslim Pro previously, to our understanding. Now they're dating apps to surveil Muslims both in the U.S. and overseas. So if you're a congressional office and you're reading this document, or a member of the public and you'd like more information about any of these identified priorities, please email CARE at info@care.com, subject line 118th Congressional Priorities. But I'm just really excited about this document. I've been working at CARE for 12 going on 13 years. 2 years ago, we published our 100 days priorities for the Biden administration. A number of those identified issues have been addressed, or God willing, they'll be addressed in the future. But now this is the first time that CARE has publicly released its priorities for the Muslim community, because we want both Muslims and our allies to see the types of bills that CARE is supporting and that the Muslim community has endorsed. And we want our congressional allies to have an easy and accessible document where they can really start understanding what are we promoting, what do we want, and these are really great bills. And so again, just a quick run through of these bills. As I mentioned earlier, the Access to Counsel Act. This is alphabetical, by the way. The Afghan Adjustment Act, which would provide a pathway to citizenship for all those Afghan evacuees in the United States. The American Dream and Promise Act, which would provide a pathway to citizenship for all those dreamers in the U.S. Again, the Combating International Islamophobia Act. We are supporting, of course, the reintroduction of the Defending Human Rights of Palestinian Children and Families Living Under Israeli Military Occupation Act. That specifically also looks at the rights of Israeli children, Palestinian children in Israeli prisons. We're also supporting the reintroduction and adoption of the End Racial and Religious Profiling Act, which would add religion in other categories as protected characteristics, and would prevent federal law enforcement from using those characteristics as one of their primary focus points in investigating communities. You cannot just be Muslim, and that should not be the only reason why the FBI or another federal agency is coming into your mosque and surveilling your community. We are supporting the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. We are opposing the Israeli Anti-Boycott Act, which limits the free speech of Americans opposing apartheid in Israel. We are supporting the Keeping Our Promise Act, the Justice for Shireen Act, which formalizes what the Biden administration is already doing in creating congressional oversight, where it's demanding that the FBI investigate the assassination of American Palestinian journalist. We are supporting the No Ban Act, which I mentioned earlier, the Neighbors Not Enemies Act, which closes the laws passed by Congress and that the president used during World War II to intern Japanese Americans. It was a justification for the Muslim ban. We are supporting a prohibition of weapons sales to human rights violators in Egypt, India, Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United Arab Emirates. We are supporting the Protecting Data at the Border Act, so that if you're an American citizen and you are trying to get back into the United States or leave, that your personal electronic devices cannot really be seized without a warrant. We are supporting the renewing immigration provisions of the Immigration Act of 1929, which would create a 7-year standard for getting a green card to come into the United States, and hopefully speed up the process for getting residency. We are definitely in support of the repeal of the 2002 authorization for use of military force, the AUMF, in Iraq. This has been used for as a justification for a number of American incursions that have far outpaced the invasion of Iraq, which, by the way, CARE opposed. We support the Stop Militarizing Law Enforcement Act, which would limit weapons sales from the Department of Defense to local police. We support U.S. House resolutions against the Indian government's abuse in Jammu and Kashmir. We support the U.S. House resolution condemning human rights violations and violations of international religious freedom in India. And we support, of course, designating India as a country of particular concern. We support the U.S. House resolution honoring the victims resulting from hate crimes, Islamophobia, and anti-immigrant sentiment in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. We support the U.S. House resolution recognizing the commencement of Ramadan, similar resolutions recognizing the commencement of both Eid holidays. We oppose any House resolution removing Muslim members from Congress or from their committee assignments. In particular, we're speaking about Speaker McCarthy's threat to remove Congresswoman Ilhan Omar from the House Foreign Affairs Committee. She has been the subject of in bad faith attacks against her staunch stance in support of human rights overseas, and that's been used to attack her. And we oppose this. No Muslim member, especially the first Black Muslim hijab-wearing member that sits on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, should be stripped of her seat because of in bad faith attacks. And of course, we support the U.S. House and Senate resolutions recognizing July as Muslim American Heritage Month. And finally, the Voting Rights Advancement Act. I did already mention the hearings that we support. These are things that we will continue to push. And it's not just CARE pushing this, though. This document, these legislative priorities, these hearing topics, these hearing topics in this document, they've been vetted with American Muslim community leaders and community members, and we've had a lot of feedback. This list actually just started with 12 priorities, and it kept on growing as we heard more and more positive feedback and asked from community members and leaders. And so, again, I'm just really excited about this document, and I'm excited that we as an organization are institutionalizing how we do advocacy and how we're empowering Muslims to do this. So we're going to drop the link to this report shortly on our national website. Once we wrap up this conference, we're going to be emailing this report to every congressional office today, which I'm personally very excited about. If Ismail, our producer, could just bring up the report, show it on the screen for a minute. One second. Just kind of scrolling through it, fairly quickly. You can see that this is a very simple document. It's very accessible. It lists all of our priorities on the front end, and it provides a very short and sweet summary of the bill, how it was introduced last Congress with its you can freeze on this one. From the last Congress, it provides a summary of the bill, whether CARE supports it, the bill's history, and then a little about section just so you can have context about how either CARE supported this bill, how it made its way through Congress. It's a really cool educational document. I hope that, inshallah, next January we can have an updated release of this document in case any bills have been adopted. We could have a forward that talks about that. But again, I'm just excited because every year congressional offices, CARE chapters, and members of the public ask, what are our priorities, as they rightly should. And, we've always had an amazing series of fact sheets that we distribute, but now we've all wrapped it up into one sweet document. So I just want to thank everyone who's watching this for your support, for your support of CARE and for your future support of our advocacy as we issue action alerts, as we participate in the National Muslim Advocacy Day on Capitol Hill, and as we just really promote this legislative agenda. It's because of your support that CARE is able to compile this research, that we're able to reach out to congressional offices, and that we're really able to empower the American Muslim community. So thank you again. Make sure to click on the link for this report. We'll put it in our Facebook feed. And if you have any questions, again, email us at info@care.com. Subject line, this report. All right. Thank you so much. Assalamu alaikum.